Ready, go.
Staying alive, staying alive. I'm with Smith, Thomas, Sprinkle, Barney down in Baton Rouge, and Smith, Thomas, you're alive. What is the deal?
Well, Dan, using things that we've flown several times and making use of AQP, we were able to successfully navigate a loss of power on takeoff.
Yeah, that's perfect. I've done so many videos and stuff on where it didn't work out. Your story is fascinating because you were trained and you were ready, and it did work out, and that's why, boy, you are an expert on this. So you're interview number two. You're an AQP guy, and we're going to get into that. Before I do, real quick, I'm going to talk about a couple things real quick from California, just in case anybody's interested. The helicopter, the Bell 407, I just learned yesterday. I don't know if you're following this too, but the Bell 407 in California that we talked about specifically lost a tail rotor. That Bell 407 has had problems. They got an AD on the tail rotor. In further study, that tail rotor was not found with the wreckage. They went steep nose down. So this was not a failed auto rotation, or they did not run out of gas, as I originally kind of halfway suspected. I think the tail fell off of that thing. And then, Smith, this applies to you. Yesterday in Greensboro, North Carolina, an RV 12 took off, had an engine failure, and did not have a successful outcome. One killed in that crash. The other person is still alive, but badly burned here today. So the concept of AQP is what we're here to talk about. Now, you knucklehead, you're out there flying your Mooney at Baton Rouge. You took off for runway 31, and you and I have flown. We've practiced, and you've been following the videos, so you were kind of ready. Tell me what happened. You took off in your Mooney on runway 31. You had an engine failure. Take it from there. Tell me what happened.
Well, so basically the pre-flight takeoff, or the before flight briefing. What are we going to do? We have several options on the end of 3-1 in Baton Rouge for an engine failure and stuff like that. And so, upon rotation, we clean the airplane up and we're climbing out at about 500 feet, maybe 600 feet. I began my base turn. They were turning me back around the back of the airport for me to head out. And on the base turn, we had full loss of power. It was a complete rollback. It wasn't a seize. The engine just rolled back of power. At that moment, I looked over at my engine monitor, and and all of the indications had gone. Oil pressure had gone. RPM had gone. So I knew something had happened significant in the back of the engine. Exactly. I continued my turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I want to clarify here. You keep saying base. You were actually turning left onto the crosswind.
That's right. Yeah, I was turning crosswind out of the departure.
Right. So your crosswind leg is at 600 feet is about where your rollback occurred. So take it from there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So on the crosswind turn, the rollback happened. You kind of go through that. Okay, what's going on here? Pull yourself back together. And I went over to the engine management, and all the indications were this engine is not coming back to life. I immediately declared an emergency. With Baton Rouge Tower, and they instructed me to. I was a total engine failure. And they instructed me to enter a left downwind for 1-3, or I'm sorry, for 3-1, and I was like, unable. I am landing 1-3. And so I continued the base, flew the gear back out, established DMMS, and just at that moment was concentrated on getting the airplane back to the runway environment. Whatever happens at that point, we'll deal with.
So you had the event, you were ready for it, so there was no startle factor, shock, and surprise. You confirmed it was an engine failure. It rolled back. You lowered the nose, you flew DMMS, and then your communication with Tower, you got a call off to Tower, and you disregarded their instructions. They told you to fly left downwind for 3-1, and you did not do it, did you?
No, I didn't. Mainly because, my training and even time with you, someone reminded me a long time ago, these guys work for you and they're there to help. They're there to provide services to you, not tell you what to do. And at that moment, it was, this is what I need to have. This is what I need to get back safely and not hurt somebody or hurt myself. And
Yes.
so I executed my authority as a pilot in command. I'm taking run 1-3. As far as I was concerned, once an emergency is declared, it's my airport. We'll deal with the paperwork later.
Perfect. Well, you followed the training perfectly. It's a perfect example. The event happened. You lowered the nose. You flew DMMS, and when Tower told you to do something, you said, "No, sir, I'm not doing that. I'm declaring emergency. I'm coming right back for 1-3." And here's a picture of you on the taxiway with the fire trucks around you. That's pretty cool. And I love the story. It's a success story. We need more of these success stories. I think that you and I flew together. Your AQP training, I told you, lower the nose, fly the speed, declare an emergency, and then do what you need to do to put it back someplace. If you were going to land off the airport, you go in, gear up into the widest, flattest piece of ground that you can find. But you go in, gear up off field, and we'll still have lunch. Doesn't really matter if you land off field, gear up. In your case, you completed the impossible turn because you had energy, and you had enough energy after takeoff to make that nice 180 or 190 or 200-degree turn to come back to the field. You had enough. So I congratulate you, sir, and you're alive. You're staying alive. I think that's an awesome story.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dan. And look, the training, participating in AQP and going through that it's not something you can. I don't even know how to say it. It's not something you can say, "Oh, I know how to do that. I know how to do that." But what did they say? I heard someone say it the other day in one of your videos that in an emergency, you fall to your training, not to what you know. And I can tell you that taking authority of the situation and being ready. And the other thing that is, as much as we talk about it, and every time that I've had this experience, I've experienced 2 engine outs at this point. There's no amount of training that you can deal with how much time it takes you to react. Even queued up, ready to go, like you're briefed, you're like, this is not happening. And if you just stop and count to 5, then you can start taking action. And that's a lot of time. And that's a lot of time in this particular airplane. It's got a really slick wing. I was at a high deck angle, like the thing was climbing out. And when the power comes off of it, I mean, if you force it or you do a pull, I've watched your videos and you've talked about the people pulling back and stuff like that. And it's just so interesting how hard you have to push yourself to fall back on the training. And so all I can say is I'm alive.
Yep. Well, that's perfect. And I appreciate you going on a Zoom call. I got a couple questions. These are standard questions. And anybody out there that's watching these videos that has either a really great success story or an industry expert that wants to talk about AQP as it applies to general aviation, I'd love to do a Zoom call with you. But I'm going to ask you a couple questions in review. Now we know who you are, where you are, and where you were that day and what happened. Let me ask you a couple quick questions in review. I think I already know the answers to these questions, but I'm going to ask them to you anyway. So you have first experience with FAA check rides. You're a pilot. You've been through check rides and all that kind of stuff. Tell me what the difference is between doing an FAA maneuver on a check ride and an AQP scenario that we talk about.
I think it was Bill. See, it's apples and oranges. It's 2 completely different things. You're preparing for the scenario. You're preparing for the situation that you're either going to go have lunch later or you're going for an ambulance ride. And I think that the scenario-based training, I think me having an opportunity to have exposure to the to scenario-based training is something that I highly encourage everyone to do. So it's two different things. I can't even speak to them in the same paragraph.
It is. It's apples and oranges. And the whole AQP for general aviation thing that came down, that migrated from higher up, 121, 135. That came from the big boy stuff. Is it, in your opinion, is it possible to adopt AQP philosophy that came from the big boys? Is it therefore possible to adopt that same philosophy for little airplane flying?
I did it. I do it every day. Every one of my airplanes are marked with DMMS, and like we talked about, every time we've flown together, it takes the thinking out of it. It gives you a number. Go for the number, and it's absolutely part of my flying. It's just ingrained in everything I do as far as close airport operations.
Perfect. Question number 3: Are today's pilots? And we're losing about an average of about 18 airplanes per month has been pretty steady. Are we being more killed by ACS, by FAA maneuvers, and like a maneuver is a steep turn or Shondell or an S turn across the road? Are we more being killed every month by maneuvers or scenarios?
It's got to be scenarios. I mean, the RV went in the other day. I mean, our local police helicopter maneuver. I mean, so many things. It's always. I mean, it's all. I said sorry. I should say maneuvers. I mean scenarios. It's situations. Something. Some startling situation is what is causing people to crash these airplanes.
Perfect. And my next question: the startle factor. You suffered an engine failure. You could have either locked up, you could have frozen, or you could have had the wrong reaction. You could have pulled. Did your AQP training and your knowledge of what's going on here, did it help you to reduce the startle factor down to a minimum so you knew right away what you were being handed, you knew what to do? How much did your AQP training reduce your startle factor for you in that situation?
Well, I think that my answer to that is, as much as we'd like to think that we can overrule or manage the startle factor, we can't. And just the briefing on, oh, you know what, this is a 3-1 departure. I've got these takes off the left. That's where I'm going. You know what I'm saying? If briefing that, having that kind of up, at a higher point in your mind during the takeoff phase, is something that I don't really feel as trained as was trained. Well, that kind of training wasn't given to me when I got my, as I've moved through my ratings.
Perfect. Yeah, it's not. Is there any downside of pilots and CFIs studying AQP on a voluntary basis for these scenarios, even though it's not required by the FAA? Can you see any downside to thinking about this, talking about it, and being ready? Any downside?
I don't know why anybody would push back on anything that makes you a safer and more confident pilot. That's just, I don't understand. I mean, it's just like the tools that we have in the cockpit to be able to navigate and things like that. The tools are there. I cannot see any reason why you wouldn't want to leverage them.
Exactly. Is a biennial flight review conducted once every 2 years covering maneuvers like the steep turn or the S turn across the road, the ACS maneuvers? Is that sufficient for the average GA pilot?
Well, Dan, I think the way you and I met is me. I kind of, when as your channel became more and more popular, and I found that we were, nearby. I think too many people use the biannual flight review as a checkbox. Yep. And I know that when we met up, and I think we've flown 2 or 3 times before, 2 or 3 times, but I think the first time we flew, it's like, I would like to fly with you. It had nothing to do with the biannual flight review. And then at some point, we've flown. I think even the other day I reached out to you after the Bill Z email or the Bill Z interview, and I said the statement of become a consumer of training. That's fascinating. You're spending money. You're spending money on this. Get something out of it. Right. Exactly. And make sure that the person that you're working with is not just somebody who's going to sign you off for 3 takeoffs and landings in a slow flight. I mean, okay, when's the last time you had to do slow flight to save your whatever? You're behind, and it's just not part of. It's not. So yeah. So So, I'm totally going to take Bill's statement on the whole concept of become a consumer of flight of training and things like that. Become a consumer of training and make sure that whoever you're working with is there to teach to come out of it, to get for you to get something out of it at the end of your session.
Yeah, it's I recommend that us pilots, I recommend that you stay alive. It would cause me a lot less work to have to travel to your city to show your burning smoke and hole in the ground. I recommend that you just take a little bit of effort to understand the scenarios and be ready. My last question is, so do you as a GA pilot endorse, obviously, I guess you do, the concept, this is voluntary AQP scenario-based training for pilots. Give me your best endorsement for, not for me, Dan Greider. I don't have a product. I don't have anything to sell you. I'm talking about the philosophy. I didn't invent it and I don't own it. I don't own CRM either. I like CRM and I don't own it. Give me your best endorsement for the philosophy of AQP as applied to the general aviation pilot.
If it's good enough for the big boys, it's good enough for us. I don't know why you have to go any further than that.
Perfect. Perfect. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're alive, brother. I don't have time to run down to your town and do a video on where you took your last.
You're not coming to my crash site, Dan. We're not doing that. I'd never hear the end of it.
You would never hear the end of it. I appreciate it, brother. I got to get out of here, and I appreciate you taking the time. And we'll get this in your interview number 2, and I'm going to keep on cranking them out. It's a success story, and I am glad you're still with us, brother.
Hey, thanks for doing what you're doing, Dan. I really do believe that it's making a difference and bringing awareness. And I know that that I don't think people appreciate how much time and effort you're putting into this and getting this information out there. And I for one, sincerely appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, and we'll get dinner here one of these nights. All right.
Sounds great.
All right. See you.
See ya.